So what you can see here in the calculation, in the cash flow calculation then, and that's really interesting for you as an investor, right? You want to know, do I have to chip in money, additional money on a monthly basis? Do I even get money on a monthly basis from this investment? Having signed these contracts, I knew that I already made a couple €1,000 just by buying these properties now. And that's really the art of investing, right? Whenever you buy a property, you want to be sure that you buy it for less than the market value so that you can make an instant profit. Now, this is what the Excel spreadsheet looks like. This is what I use to track all of my investments. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be giving you an exclusive look into my real estate portfolio valued at over 2.3 million euros. I'll break down my key properties, my approach to financing, cash flow strategies, and even share some tips on how to navigate the German real estate market. In the south of Germany, from Freiburg and Villingen-Schwenningen all the way up in the Black Forest, I've built a portfolio of over 14 assets, each serving a specific role in my overall investment strategy. And now let's dive in. Before we start, keep in mind that I'm not doing this video to brag or to show off what I have achieved over the past couple of years. It's really just to give you an indication of what you can actually do whenever you put the time and effort, and also money obviously, into it, and where you can get if you stay with your vision long term. Also, just another remark, I have gotten many emails from people just like you, from viewers of my YouTube channel, who've been asking me whether I offer consultation, and yes, that's actually a thing. So if you would like to talk to me about a specific apartment you've been looking at, feel free to get in touch with me, and I'd be happy to hop on a quick call and discuss things further with you. For example, I've been getting many requests to evaluate a certain property which my viewers have been interested in, and in a call we'd be going over their investment strategy, how much to finance, how much equity to bring in, where to finance it, and how to rent it out, for example. That's just one case. There are many more requests I've had and consultations I've given over the past years. So if you're interested, just hit me up via email. Also, if you wish to support me, feel free to become a member on Patreon. If you do become a paid member, for example, you get access to specific documents which I have uploaded there. For example, the calculation spreadsheet, which I always use to calculate my investments, but also a bunch of other valuable insights, which I post only on Patreon. But now, first, let's get a quick overview of my portfolio. I own properties in key regions such as Freiburg and Villingen-Schwenningen, as well as Oberried, which is like a small town close to Freiburg, and even a commercial plot in Villingen, also very close to Freiburg. Why did I choose Freiburg, you might ask? Excellent question. Well, I'm currently living in Berlin, as I've said previously in other videos, but I'm originally from the city of Freiburg, and I really want to live there long term in the next couple of years again. Which means that I'll be moving back from Berlin to Freiburg within the next couple of years, and I just really want to invest in the region I want to live in long term. Obviously, I don't want to travel much to have a look at my properties, for example, and that's really why I am investing in Freiburg. Also, the region of Freiburg and like southern Germany overall is, in my opinion, also a possible profitable investment in the long term, as obviously, there's a lot of industry in southern Germany. You're also close to France and Switzerland. It takes about 45 minutes, for example, to get from Freiburg to Switzerland. So you have a lot of Swiss people, for example, also buying up properties, buying up apartments in this region as well. I think in the long term, real estate prices are not going to decline in this region, at least not to a huge degree. They might decline due to economical reasons in the future. But I think looking at it from a long-term perspective, I don't think real estate prices in this region are going to crumble like they would in other regions. Now, to get back to the topic, as I just mentioned, I own a mix of residential units and also one commercial property. If you're interested in this commercial property, I highly recommend watching this video up here, in which I describe how I run my container business, my sort of side hustle, which I do next to my full-time consulting job, with which I rent out my shipping containers on my property. But let's get back to my portfolio. Now, this is what the Excel spreadsheet looks like. This is what I use to track all of my investments. Obviously, if you do have a bunch of investments, as I do 14 overall at the moment, it really is difficult to stay on top of the relevant data for all of these investments. That's why I keep them all combined in this one single document here. So now, before we start, let's quickly dive into this Excel spreadsheet. I'm just going to give you an overview of the spreadsheet itself, and then we'll dive into some of these properties here in a second. So on the left side, you can see all of the properties which I have, 14 at the moment. As I said before, I got rid of the address. So usually you can see the exact address and the item number or unit number over here. But I got rid of it, obviously, due to confidentiality reasons. And then on the right side, you can see for each of these properties here on the left, different sections, which I will guide you through here just quickly. So first we have the section on the data on the property, such as the building or construction year, how many square meters the apartment is, the purchasing price and so on. Then the data on the purchase process, such as the notary date, but also the date of the transfer of benefits and burdens, which you need for your tax declaration, for example. Then we have the section of the rent, which is also really interesting. I'm going to skip that one. And then obviously another really interesting section, how much debt do I still owe to my local bank, which I financed all of my properties here. Another section is the cash flow calculation. So we'll look at the exact cash flow I get from each unit. Then I also do have private loans from my sister and my girlfriend, which I documented here. And then in the end, we'll have a look at the overall value which I estimate my apartments to be in at the moment. And now I'd say let's dive deeper into the spreadsheet here and have a look at all of these investments. So what you can see here, the first two properties which I own, they're both in Freiburg. Freiburg, as I said before, is a highly attractive city to invest in, but also to live in. It's really close to France and Switzerland and also the Black Forest. It's a highly sought after region. It's always been expensive to invest there. So the first two properties are actually in the same building. They are located in the Eschholzstraße in Freiburg. I've actually shown this apartment or the building itself in several other YouTube videos as well. What's interesting about this property is that this whole building is basically a collection of 100 student apartments, meaning you can actually only rent out these apartments to students. You can't rent them out to anyone else. So all of these units are basically pretty much the same. The construction year for these two units is 1983. They have the same square meter amount, 25.6. So it's really just a small one-bedroom apartment for each of these. And for one of these apartments, I also do have a parking space, which is like the German word Stellplatz over here. As you can see, 104 units overall in this building, and they're all the same, right? I mean, they all pretty much look the same. And I bought them for the first one for 105,000 euros, and that was actually my first investment which I made. And the second one I got really cheap for 95,000 euros. What I can say now is that I watched some other apartments in this building being sold, and they were sold for roughly 140,000 euros, including one parking lot or parking space. But as you can see, having bought these two apartments, I'm way below that amount of 140,000 euros, meaning I really already made a big profit of just buying these apartments. I've kept them for roughly 2 years now, but I'm planning to keep them for an additional 8 years to sell them tax-free after 10 years. For these two properties, I get roughly 470 euros in cold rent and 50 euros for the parking space for this one apartment. And I'm not going to dive deeper into the operating costs and the warm rent because I'm only as an investor, or not only, but I'm mainly interested in the cold rent, which I get to pay off my loan to the bank, right? What is then interesting over here is the amount of debt I have for these two properties. So for the first one, I was really conservative. I brought in a lot of equity, even though I bought this apartment for, as you remember, 105,000 euros. This first one, I financed only 58,000 and I brought the rest in with equity. And the other one I bought at 95,000 euros and I financed the whole amount, the 100% of this purchasing price, 95,000 euros as well. Now, what differentiates is the tax rate and also the fixed interest duration. For the first property, I have an interest rate of 3.95% with a 10-year fixed interest rate duration, meaning the interest rate is going to stay that way for the next, or now 8 years. At the beginning, it was 10 years, obviously. For the other property, however, I have an effective interest rate of 5.05%. It's way higher because I only fixed the interest rate duration for 3 years, meaning after 3 years I have to refinance. I got to go to my bank again and tell them, okay guys, I need a new contract now. And due to that shorter time period, comparing the 10 to the 3 years, I had to pay more in interest. Now, why did I only choose 3 years for this one? At some point, I'm thinking about selling one or the other property again in a shorter time period, not only 10 years, but maybe after like 3, 4, 5 years. In this specific case, I think I'll just refinance after these 3 years are over. at a much lower interest rate level, right? Since the interest rates are declining at the moment, the ECB, but also the Fed in America are reducing the overall interest rate. So I'm sort of speculating on lower interest rates here for this specific property. I would imagine if I would refinance that, I think that would be the case in like 1 or 1.5 years. I would guess that the interest rate would be 3 years whenever I do that. But that's just a high speculation. Nobody knows where the interest rates are really going, right? Also interesting here, I'm repaying the respective loans with 2 and 1.5%. I'd say that's pretty much the average repayment rate many investors use, especially if you have a long time horizon, right? You want to invest long term, you can keep a lower repayment rate due to tax reasons as well. Then for these two properties, due to the original differentiating bank loan amounts, the bank installment on a monthly basis also differentiates, right? For the first one I paid 280 euros a month, and for the other one 506 euros. So what you can see here in the calculation, in the cash flow calculation then, and that's really interesting for you as an investor, right? You want to know, do I have to chip in money, additional money on a monthly basis? Do I even get money on a monthly basis from this investment? And if I look at the numbers here now, since my bank installment is only 280 euros, however, I make like 460 euros here in cold rent, my cash flow is highly positive, since I only took out this lower loan, right, of only 58,000 euros. Which means that I make roughly 185 euros per month, meaning 2,200 euros per year. And obviously that is only due to my small bank loan, I would call it, of 55,000 euros. Now for the other property, I financed 100%, right? The whole purchasing price. For this investment now, my bank installment is 506 euros, again, with this high interest rate, which I have only for the next like 1.5 years. After that, it's going to reduce again, meaning my bank installment is also going to decline in 1.5 years, most likely, if the interest rate is going to be at a lower level than it is today. And at the moment, I'm making a small or slight negative cash flow of 11 euros per month, meaning 130 euros per year, pretty much. And also what is really important for you as an investor, how much am I actually paying back to the bank? How much is my repayment on an annual basis? And that's what you can see here. 1,160 euros in repayment for this one apartment and roughly 1,400 euros for the other apartment. Now for this first apartment, I just quickly want to highlight, I also took in a loan from a private person of like 30,000 euros here with a 10-year duration of the loan. And I did this at the beginning because I had to pay a lower interest rate. We now agreed on a higher interest rate level. But at that point, a couple of years back, I was thinking that this might be a good idea. If I look at it now, retrospectively, I think it doesn't really matter whether I get these 30,000 from the bank at the same interest rate level, right? Or from a private person in this case. Now let's have a look at, and this is probably the most important column over here, right? The estimation value. As I said before, I know that properties in this building have actually been sold for 145,000 euros, including one parking space. Since I do have one parking space over here for the second apartment, I'm just going to evaluate it exactly the same, since I know this transaction has been made last year, and I didn't even take into account here that the interest rates last year have been higher compared to now, meaning I'll get at least this amount, I would say. For this apartment, 145,000 euros and 140,000 euros for the other apartment without the parking space. Now, as you can see, I estimate the value of these two properties at 285,000 euros. However, I only paid 200,000 euros whenever I bought these two apartments. Having signed these contracts, I knew that I already made a couple thousand euros just by buying these properties now. And that's really the art of investing, right? Whenever you buy a property, you want to be sure that you buy it for less than the market value so that you can make an instant profit whenever you just bought these apartments. Next, we do have two properties in Villingen-Schwenningen, which is like in the heart of the Black Forest, right? These two apartments were really in a bad condition whenever I bought them. You can see the construction year is 1937 for both of these properties. It's actually a three-party home, meaning there are 3 apartments in this building and I own 2 of them. As you might have seen in some other videos, I renovated them both as well. I did most of the work myself, however, for some things I also hired construction workers who did the work for me. The two properties or apartments, they differentiate in size. So one of them is 58 and the other one is 44 square meters, for example. With one of these properties, I also have a small gardening house, which I rent out separately for like 160 euros for somebody who just wants to store their bikes in there, which is really funny. And I bought these two properties for 159,000 euros combined, or like 94,000 euros for the first one and 65 for the other one. I also had these apartments for like a year now. Now, why did I buy these two apartments in the first place? I knew that whenever I would renovate these two apartments, I would get a highly positive cash flow out of this. Since there are only a few really nice apartments in the city of Villingen-Schwenningen, and there are so many people, and especially students, for example, also from the so-called Polizeihochschule, so the police school, which is situated in Villingen-Schwenningen for the state of Baden-Württemberg, meaning they get a lot of students each year who want to become police personnel, and they obviously need housing also in that area. And that's why I knew I should invest in there, renovate these two apartments, rent them out at a sort of more higher rate or rent, and I would make a big profit with that as well. I'm going to skip these columns over here, they're not too important. What's interesting here again is probably the debt column. I also financed these two apartments through my local Sparkasse, the local bank over here. And the first apartment I financed almost 100% of it. So the purchasing price was 94,000 and I financed 90,000, and for the other one the purchasing price was 65,000 and I financed 60,000 of them. So I did bring in some equity in addition to the side costs, which I mentioned in some other videos as well, such as the notary, transfer tax and so on. But I also covered the renovation costs from my own equity. In that case, they were about 30,000 euros overall, I would say. Now, currently, obviously, I repaid some of the debt I owe to the bank, which means that these amounts here are obviously lower than the initial or original bank loan amount. And I also financed these properties with a lower fixed interest duration of 5 and 3 years over here, which means that I also need to pay more in interest, so 5 and 4.65% in interest for these two apartments here. My bank installment is then 477 euros and roughly 300 euros, which leaves me at, if you jump back again to the cold rent, I make like 830 euros for each of these apartments. However, my bank installment is so much lower at like 477 and like 300 euros, which leaves me with a really nice profit and cash flow each month, right? So I make roughly 1,000 euros in profit each month or in cash flow just from these two apartments, which is really nice, and that's like the ultimate goal. That's what you want as an investor, right? To have a really positive cash flow. I also got one loan from a private individual as well, which I'm not gonna dig deeper into in this video here. And then again, the estimation value, I would say that this apartment is now worth 160,000 euros, the first one, and 118,000 euros for the second one. These are obviously just estimates, right? They can vary to, I'd say, a larger degree. But even if it's not 160 for this first apartment, but rather 140, I still made a big profit out of this property, right? Especially keeping in mind that I make like 500 euros from each of these properties now on a monthly basis for the next, hopefully, years. Now, to sum up, obviously, I do make a lot of money with these two properties on a monthly basis. However, I also need to mention that there still needs some work to be done on this whole building and on the property. For example, I need to make sure that I'll get a new roof within the next 10 years. Also, I do need to get a new heating system within the next, I'd say, 1 to 2 years, since the old one is really, really old from like the 1995. So this one needs to be replaced, and that's going to cost me at least 30,000 euros at the moment, right? To get a Wärmepumpe or a heating pump in for this property, which again increases my property value, but not as much as these 30K which I have to pay. And that's really what I'm saving up the money for at the moment. Then I have another property in Schliengen, which is also like half an hour away from Freiburg, closer to the Swiss border. It's 59 square meters large, and I paid 110,000 euros for this. I bought it last year or 2 years ago roughly, and I'm now making a cold rent of 730 euros. For this apartment, I also financed the 100% of the purchasing price, meaning the 110,000 euros, with a also rather high interest rate of 4.2%. Whenever I bought this apartment, it was sort of at the top of the interest rate hike, which we saw in the last couple of years, meaning even though I got a 10-year fixed interest duration, I had to pay 4.2% to get that loan. The bank installment is 514 euros and I make a monthly cash flow of 226 euros at the moment, which is also nice. What I haven't said before is also that I renovated this apartment as well. I had to put in or chip in like an additional 15,000 euros for this renovation. For example, I exchanged the windows of this apartment. I also got a new kitchen in. I renewed the whole bathroom and all of the tiles in the kitchen. I plastered all of the walls and also other things. And then again, I had to pay these 15,000 euros for the renovation with my own equity. Now for this property, again, I would say that it is currently worth 170,000 euros. I know that another unit in this building has been sold for 194,000 euros last year. It was a bit bigger than my apartment. However, I think that 170,000 euros, especially since it's in the condition now, fully renovated, is probably a good estimate. And if you now compare this again with how much I paid initially for this apartment, these 110,000 euros plus the side costs, which accumulate to another at least 10 to 15,000 euros, and the renovation costs of another 15,000 euros, I still made a solid profit off of this apartment. And I'm now making, as I said before, 200 something euros on a monthly basis on this apartment. So that's what you want to achieve, right? Now, I have another property in Oberried, also close to Freiburg, but sort of further in the Black Forest. That was actually the first and I think now the only property which I bought without a realtor. I found this on Immobilien Scout as well. And I just had a look at the apartment. I knew that some people would want to live out on the outskirts of Freiburg or even further out in the Black Forest sort of, but being close to Freiburg. And that's why I invested in this apartment as well. I bought it for 80,000 euros. It was built in 1975. It's like 45 square meters big and it's sort of in a rather rural area. But I knew whenever I bought this apartment that it would most likely be worth more. I'm now renting out this apartment for 570 euros in cold rent, and I financed 75,000 euros from my local bank again, meaning I chipped in like the 5,000 euros in the difference to the purchasing price, in addition to the side costs such as notary, transfer tax, and so on. For this apartment, I also financed it rather short term, meaning the fixed interest duration is only 2 years, as you can see here. Meaning again, I have to pay more in interest, and that's why this interest rate is rather high with like almost 5%. My bank installment on a monthly basis is 425 euros now, and it still leaves me with a cash flow of 110 euros per month. Now, this one, as you can see here, the end of fixation of the interest rate. The red ones are the ones where the fixation period is going to end, meaning I need to go to my local bank again, as I described previously, and ask for a new contract or new financing. Hopefully, and that's what I'm betting on here, obviously, at a lower interest rate, meaning I hope that instead of paying 4.95% in interest, I have to pay hopefully 3%, maybe 3.2% in interest only, meaning my bank installment is going to reduce to a certain level. And again, my cash flow is then going to increase with that amount. For this one, I estimate the real property value to be 110,000 euros. And again, having only paid 80,000 euros and not even the realtor, since I bought it sort of offline, only from the property owner itself. There weren't really many side costs which I had to pay. I think I still made a rather big profit of buying this apartment. Next, I have another apartment in Freiburg, which is really close to the old part of the city, meaning it's worth more because it's located in the city center. There's also a parking space which comes with it, and I paid 120,000 euros for this 26 square meter apartment. It's also, again, a one bedroom apartment, which are highly sought after in Freiburg for students, for example. I make 540 in cold rent, and let me get to my bank debt again. And for this one, I only financed 96,000 euros compared to the 120,000 euros in purchasing price, which means that I brought in a rather large amount of equity of like 24,000 euros in this case. I financed this one for 10 years with a rather comparable lower interest rate, but still rather high interest rate of 3.85%. And my monthly bank installment is 428 euros, which means that I do make a positive cash flow of 150 euros each month. And this is also due to the, which I haven't talked about, the parking space, which I rent out individually or separately for like 70 euros. Yes, as you can see over here. That's how I come to this cash flow of 140 something euros. Also, one thing I forgot, I also got a loan from a private person again, in this case 10,000 euros, which I will pay back within the next years. Due to its ideal location, I estimate this property to be valued at 161,000 euros pretty much, especially if I would renovate it at least to some degree. And this goes to show again that I got this apartment really cheap compared to what I estimate the market value to be. Next, we have another apartment in Freiburg. This one is in a really good condition. It's built in 1989, is 45 square meters and also has one parking space with it. I bought it for 161,000 euros and it's currently rented out at a rather low rent of 600 euros since it's in such a good condition and has this parking space. The market rent would be a lot higher at the moment. However, since I bought this apartment with the renter already being in this apartment, I need to take over this rental agreement with the current renter, and whenever he moves out, I'm planning on obviously increasing this rent. Now for this apartment, I financed 100% of the purchasing price, meaning these 161,000 euros. I financed it for 10 years with an interest rate of 4%, and my monthly bank installment is 745 euros, which means that I make a negative cash flow of 109 euros on a monthly basis. And this is obviously to be improved in the next couple of months and years. So whenever, as I said, this guy moves out, I'll get a new renter in at a higher rate. So this will probably be cash flow neutral within the next, I don't know, 2 to 3 years. As this apartment is in a really good condition, and you can see it here in the pictures, I estimate this to be valued at 240,000 euros. This is also what Immobilien Scout Atlas tells me, which means that I, having bought this for 161,000 euros, already made a big profit when buying this, even though I have to chip in these 100 euros on a monthly basis. I am planning on making a big profit, especially tax-free after 10 years, whenever I sell the apartment. Next, we have another apartment in Oberried. Again, a fairly new apartment built in '85, which means that I don't have to touch anything within the next couple of years. Like the electricity is in a solid state, the plumbing system is in a solid state, and so on. There won't be much work to do. It's a 51 square meter apartment and I bought it for 98,000 euros. The current rent is 670 euros and I financed the whole purchasing price, meaning 100% of 98,000 euros, and I fixed the interest rate again for 10 years at an interest rate of 4%. My monthly bank installment is for this one here also 470 euros pretty much, and I make a monthly cash flow of almost 190 euros. This one, since it's not exactly in Freiburg but rather on the outskirts in a rather rural area, is not valued as high. I would say maybe 120,000 euros. It might be below that, to be honest, but that's sort of what I calculated with. Next, we have 2 more apartments in Freiburg, which are built in 1994. They're actually in the same building. One of these apartments is 29 square meters and the other one is like 37 square meters. And this is actually the apartment I talked about in this video here, which I had to renovate and which I'm now renting out for roughly 700 euros a month. I bought both of these apartments for a combined purchasing price of 280,000 euros. And as I just said, I make 700 euros per month in cold rent for this first apartment, which I just now, after the renovation, rented out. And the other one has been rented out for the past, I don't know, 5 years. And that's why the cold rent is at such a low level. If you would take the market conditions, the rent would be at a higher level, obviously. But again, since I purchased the apartment and the renter has been living in it for the past years, I take over this rental agreement and cannot increase the rent as much as I would like to immediately. Obviously, there are some guardrails which you have to take into account. For example, you can only increase the rent by 15% within 3 years, the so-called Kappungsgrenze, as we have it here in Freiburg. This is not the case for every city. I think every city can technically set its own Kappungsgrenze at some point or to some degree, but this is at least the case in Freiburg and many other cities as well. Now, I financed, and this is the first time I financed more than the 100% of the purchasing price. I financed also the side costs, meaning I financed 110% of each of these properties, which is obviously a bit risky. However, I really didn't want to chip in any more equity for these 2 apartments, and that's why I financed 110%. I financed them for 10 years at an interest rate of 4.3%. Again, since I financed 110% and not 100%, even though the interest rates have gone down over the past couple of months or in 2024 overall, I still had to pay 4.3% compared to like this 4% which I got earlier for another apartment. Then my monthly bank installment is 760 euros and 790 euros for these 2 apartments, and I make a monthly cash flow of, or negative cash flow of, roughly 100 euros for the first apartment and a significant negative cash flow of 376 euros for the second apartment. Why did I still buy this, you might ask? And for this, I recommend watching this video in which I analyzed just exactly this apartment and which indicates why I still bought this apartment, even though I'm losing money with it on a monthly basis. And we're not talking about a little bit of money, but 400 euros a month. It's like subsidizing another rent, right? However, I think that, and this renter already indicated that he wants to leave the apartment within the next 1 to 2 years, meaning I can then rent it out again to a new person at a higher rent. And I hope to then not be making as much of a loss each month, but maybe to be cash flow neutral in that case. I still bought the apartment because I think it's worth just so much more. As I said before, I bought these one for 135 and 145 for the second apartment. However, I would say they're worth 171,000 euros at the moment and 220,000 euros, which means that even though I make a monthly loss, especially for this loss for the second apartment, I'm willing to make this loss if I know that the market value is a lot higher at the moment. And that's why I bought these 2 apartments. Also, both of these apartments are built in '94, which means that I really don't have to touch anything except from the internal stuff, such as the walls. So there aren't any bigger renovations coming up in the next 10, maybe even 20 years, such as getting a new roof, redoing the facade of the building, the heating system and other things. I think that's really going to stay the same as it is for the next 10 to 20 years. Next, we have another apartment which I just recently bought. It's built in the 1960s. It's 65 square meters, 3 bedrooms overall, or three rooms in general, and I bought it for 210,000 euros, and I think that's really a steal in Freiburg. The square meter price is roughly 3,200 euros, I think, for this apartment, and usually I would say the square meter price in Freiburg is around 5,000 euros. If it's renovated, obviously it can get much higher than that. So I think having bought this apartment, I already made a big profit. Now let's go through the details again real quick. It's currently rented out at 750 euros in cold rent, and I financed this whole purchasing price, meaning 100% of the purchasing price, these 210,000 euros. And I fixed the interest rate for 10 years and an interest rate of 4.11%. Now this accumulates to 960 euros in my monthly bank installment, which I have to pay. And this leaves me with a negative cash flow of roughly 300 euros. Again, I think that I bought this property at such a cheap price, or for such a cheap price, that this is going to benefit me in the long term, since I'm calculating that, especially after a renovation of like 10 to 20,000 euros, this property will be worth more significantly, such as 330,000 euros. Maybe not at the moment, probably after I've renovated it. However, 330,000 euros compared to these 210,000 euros I paid initially. Again, obviously side costs need to be added as well, which were significantly in that case as well. An additional 20,000 euros, I would guess, as well as another renovation such as 10 to 20,000 euros. I still made a big profit off of just buying this property. And then lastly, the last residential property which I own, or which I just recently bought, is this one here. It's also again based in Villingen-Schwenningen, and I'm planning on renting it out for roughly 1,000 euros in cold rent. It's a rather large apartment with 3 bedrooms, 77 square meters overall. So I think I will be able to rent it out for this price, and I financed again 100% of the purchasing price. I financed it again for 10 years at an interest rate of 4.11%. And I am planning on making a monthly cash flow of roughly 300 euros again. So this sort of evens out with the other apartment which I just bought, one line up top here. For this one, I think the market value is slightly higher. So taking into account the side costs I also had for this apartment, I think this sort of evens out with the current market value. And then lastly, I'm not gonna dig deeper into this one here. This is the property which I have, a piece of land which I just recently bought in Villingen, also close to Freiburg, which I use to rent out storage space with my shipping container business. If you're interested in that, again, check out this video here. I bought it for 115,000 euros, and to be honest, I think that's a bit over the current market value. I'm getting 800 euros in rent at the moment for this property, and my current bank installment is 700 euros. I also financed this property for 10 years at an interest rate of 4.49%. It's obviously a bit higher compared to these residential investments which I made previously, since this is a commercial property which I own, and that for these properties the interest rate is always a bit higher. Since my bank installment is only 700 euros, however, I'm getting 800 euros from the shipping container business. I make 100 euros in positive cash flow for this property. And yeah, I estimated this property to be around 115,000 euros as well, meaning I bought it at market conditions. It might actually be a bit lower. So you can reduce that by maybe 5,000 euros, but we'll see how it plays out in the long term. Now, in sum, I estimate that these properties are worth roughly 2.3 million euros at the moment. Obviously, this is just an estimation. It's always difficult to find the exact market price for real estate properties. It's not like you could just look up the exact market price for any rental property or apartment in any city. For example, it's obviously not comparable to stocks where you can just log into your browser or into your broker and have a look at the stock prices. It obviously doesn't work like this. The real estate market is very intransparent, meaning you don't really know what the exact price of the property is. However, that is the number I came up with, knowing this market really well now, having done this for the last couple of years. And now again, taking into account my purchasing price for these properties, 1.67 million euros, I think that I already made a big profit by just buying these. So if I would potentially sell them off after 10 years tax-free, I would make a significant profit in buying these apartments. And that's my real estate portfolio in a nutshell. Whether you're just starting out or looking to scale, I hope this gave you some insight into the strategies and numbers behind real estate investing in Germany. If you enjoyed this video, give this video a thumbs up. Also, make sure to subscribe to my channel. If you have any questions, put them down in the comment section below. And I hope to see you guys soon. Take care. Bye.